Hey everybody, it's Tim Wagner, and I'm back with another Writing in the Dark blog post. This one's going to be about how to use other cultures' folklore, legends, and myths in your horror fiction, and more importantly, how not to. In other words, how to do so respectfully without any kind of appropriation. So you might be familiar with my How to Write Horror book, Writing in the Dark. There it is. In there, one of the things I suggest in terms of coming up with ideas is to look to other cultures, myths, and legends. And I didn't go into enough detail about it to explain that I didn't mean for people to lift them wholesale, but to be inspired by them. So I thought, hey, I'll make a video that talks about it. So one of the things to ask yourself, if you're thinking about using another culture's myths and legends as, fodder for your horror fiction, is to decide, what actually belongs to a specific culture and what belongs to the entire human race. We're talking about abstract things. We're talking about, there is no document that says this culture gets this myth figure and this culture gets that one, and this one's good for everybody to use. We are just left to determine it on our own. So a good example would be like European myths of vampires and werewolves. They have been around for a long time. It's difficult to say which country they came from originally. Cultures all around the world have versions of these kind of things. Plus we've had almost 100 years of cinema that have had vampires and werewolves in them. Movies made from all kinds of cultures. So if you grow up in this world, you have probably grown up with werewolves and vampires being myth figures that anybody could use. But an example on the other side would be Graham Masterton's novel, The Manitou. He wrote it in the 70s, back before people thought about these kind of issues, really. And his whole idea was to take a Native American legend, but to have it appear in the modern world, which was something that you hadn't seen a lot of back in the 70s. Well, Graham Masterton's, from Britain. I'm pretty sure correct me if I'm wrong, Graham, but I'm pretty sure that he didn't, grow up as a Native American. So if that culture still sees the Manitou as part of their living belief system still, then you could count that as appropriation. And again, not picking on Graham because he did it a long, long time ago, back before people were talking about these kind of issues. So if you're a member of the specific culture to whom a myth image like vampires or Manitou or whatever, and I don't mean to offend anybody by calling Manitous myth images in case you believe Manitus are real, or vampires for that matter. Is it a sacred kind of thing? For example, years ago I did a proposal for a novel that I ended up not writing, but in it I used the goddess Kali as one of the characters. Didn't occur to me at the time that that's a goddess that people actually, it's part of a living belief system, or she is. So what I did was I changed it. I went to farther back into myths that people don't necessarily, believe in anymore, and found a kind of an analog that I could use, change the name a little bit. So I was still able to have the kind of character I wanted in the proposal, but without appropriating Kali. So if you're not a member of a culture that grew up with myth image being part of the culture, legend, folklore, trope, whatever, don't use it. So don't appropriate it wholesale. Appropriation brings up the specter of colonization, which is really sensitive for an awful lot of people who have grown up under the heel, basically, of colonizers. Something that descendants of colonizers really don't understand. I don't understand it fully. How can I? I'm a descendant of colonizers. So one of the things that I go by is like doctors. I just do no harm first. So if I'm going to go ahead and create something, I ask myself, could it do harm? And everybody's answers to this is going to be different. But mine is, instead of taking wholesale somebody's myth image, figure, folklore, character, concept from a belief system, what I'll do is I'll use it as maybe inspiration if there's something about it that fascinates me. So here's an example. I've been fascinated with this character ever since I was a kid. I don't know how to pronounce the name of this vampire, but it's a Penanggalan. It's a really cool vampire from Southeast Asia. There she is. For some reason, they're always women. They detach themselves from their body, these vampires, and fly through the air, carrying all their internal organs with them. This cool illustration comes from Ethan, who goes by Mad Monster Maker on Pinterest. I'll put a link to his Etsy store in the comments in case you want to go check out his stuff. So I think this thing is awesome. I've been fascinated since I learned about it as a kid. But what I would do instead of taking that monster is I would ask myself, what about it? The monster fascinates me. So one of the things that fascinates me is only part of the vampire goes out to prey. It separates somehow. It's ugly and revolting instead of beautiful. Like a lot of the modern image of vampires is that they are attractive, so they will lure prey to them instead of having to run out and attack and just pounce on them. But this thing, I mean, the face may be may be beautiful, but all those flopping, glistening organs, pulsating organs, probably are not. Let's see what else. So I wonder, how would it attract prey? So there are things that you can always do. So here's just me with some spitballing some ideas about how I might take what inspires me about this type of vampire to create my own kind of thing. So let's see. It makes me wonder why vampires are only female in this legend. So maybe I could come up with something like that. Maybe vampires are only female, and there's a reason for that, and maybe that'll fuel my story. How would a really ugly vampire, frightening, super inhuman, how would that attract prey? That might give me a story. Since the heart is the primary blood organ, maybe it's the only thing that goes out to hunt. And maybe that's why you have to stake a vampire's heart, because it's really the only part that goes out to hunt. Or maybe the whole circulatory system does, with the heart and all the arteries and veins and capillaries. That's the stuff that takes blood, right? Or is filled with blood. So that might work really well. Maybe only the arms go out and they grab a victim and bring it back to the vampire. Maybe somebody has separated a vampire's head from its body and keeps it like a pet in a bird cage or something. Maybe uses it somehow to attack victims. Or maybe somebody has actually taken a vampire's body and holds it prisoner, threatening to destroy it if the head doesn't go out and do that person's bidding. You can probably come up with a million different ideas based on the things that fascinate you about a particular myth image. And the benefit of this is that not only do you avoid appropriation, or even the chance of appropriation, but you're going to come up with something different and unique, which is going to be, not just another story about just another monster in folklore, no matter how good it is. This is going to be a monster that you have created, based on the stuff that fascinates you about a particular type of monster. So it's going to be a lot more individualistic, a lot more interesting for readers, especially well-read horror readers that have encountered all kinds of vampires or werewolves or ghosts or whatever before. So you want to go ahead and use them for inspiration, like I said. You want to go ahead and think about, it's the most important thing, to really think deeply about what is it that fascinates you about this image, this character, this trope, this legend. What is it that makes you want to write about it? Investigate that, interrogate that, dig down deep to it, find out what it is, and then build a brand new version of it that's yours, nobody else's on earth, that you can write about. And there's nothing wrong with telling people, I was inspired by this particular thing. It'll still be yours. Nobody, I think, would take that as appropriation. Now, that's what I think. Now, if you disagree with me, put some comments down so that when people see this video, they can go ahead and read them and say, oh, there's another perspective. Because all of this is, when we talk about these kind of things, we are talking about individual choices. And we're talking about changing attitudes and values in terms of, how, for our case, how myth images and legends and story tropes and things like that, are used. Who do they belong to? What's the way to do no harm when you're writing stories? All right, that's it. If you have any ideas for future videos, please let me know in the comments. Otherwise, I'll see you next time.